Diversity and inclusion in children's TV. We know why it's so important to do this well, but how are we actually doing? Well, here's the good news. According to the latest data set from the Diamond Reports, children's TV is leading the way when it comes to on-screen diversity. And actually it has been for a while. Children's TV has blazed a trail for decades with fresh talent of all ethnicities, genders, disabilities, and across UK regions, all represented on screen. It's been the training ground for so many established presenters and performers who now also entertain us as grown-ups. So in the last Diamond dataset, we know that children's led the genres with 11.9% representation on screen for disability and high numbers of Black and mixed ethnicity representation, so 8.3 and 11% respectively, compared to a national population average of around 13%. But here's the bad news. When it comes to representing the diverse groups that we serve off screen, so the people who decide what stories we tell and how we tell them, we are really lagging behind. And this is particularly the case when it comes to senior roles, race and disability. So the 2021 dataset from Diamond shows that off-screen contributions from Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups make up about 4% of contributions, with Asian representation particularly low in our workforce, around 2.1%. Disabled people make up 6.6% of the workforce in children's. So in context, the UK disabled population is around 18 to 20%. I'm sure this data comes as no surprise to you, because those of you who are listening today, many of you are involved in finding and hiring creative talent. And you know how hard it is to do diversity and inclusion both really well and do it consistently. Because there are so many structural, cultural and financial reasons why the best creative talent in this country doesn't always end up in our TV jobs. And by the way, it's not just TV or children's programming. It's a major problem across sectors. No one's really cracked this yet, but in TV and particularly children's, we do need to find better ways to do this work now. And that's because if we don't represent the diversity and perspectives and ideas and lives of the young minds that we serve, we risk becoming irrelevant to them. And we also risk becoming less good at what we do, because time and time again, all the studies show the most profitable and successful and creative teams have diversity at their core. And this is particularly when you look at decision-making roles. But I know you know that already, and very few people working in this sector would argue anything otherwise. I think we all accept it as a crucial thing that we know we have to do better and we want to do better. So the stumbling block is how. How do we translate our good intentions, the difficult workforce data and the ring-fence funds into more tangible, meaningful actions? How do we, as a production workforce, deliver a razor focus when it comes to our regional hubs to truly understand the skills gaps and talent bases that we have? How do we take our gains from on-screen and our moments of breakthrough off-screen to design skills training and talent progression in a much more joined up way, as opposed to it happening in silos as sometimes happens? Because D&I actually is the long game. And in a world, in a sector of tight deadlines, squeezed budgets and short contracts, how can we now do more than just try and hit these targets via often what feels like a scramble for diverse talent each time we crew up? Where do we want to be? We want to be in a place that when we're hiring, we are sending the clearest signal to people who are underrepresented in TV that their skills and their experiences and their perspectives are not only wanted, they're much needed and valued, and they belong. In 5 years' time, when I come back here and maybe talk about how far we've come, we want our off-screen stats to rival our on-screen stats and our progress to shine through in the innovative and exciting content that our young audiences watch. One of the most frequent comments I hear from productions is, this is great, we really want to do this, but where do I start first, and how do I access funds and help to do this really effectively? So you're in luck. In this session, we're exploring exactly how we do this. We've got representatives from 3 major broadcasters lined up to tell us how they are working with you, with indies, with production teams to achieve D&I, and how, where they have ring-fence funds, how this money is trickling down in practice, how you can access it, basically. We also have a very practical case study from A Productions on the various actions that they took to shift up the inclusion and diversity of all their teams over the course of 2 years, amid some real talent pipeline challenges in animation that I'm sure will resonate with many of us. Hi, Catherine. Thanks so much for talking to me today. So I know you've been doing a huge amount here at A Productions to really switch up your diversity and inclusion. So can you talk to me about your journey over the last 3 years? What have you been doing to improve both the diversity of your teams and the inclusion of the company as a whole?
We wanted to, first of all, identify where our skills and talent gaps were. We also wanted to understand how underrepresented groups perceive the company. And so we set out to commission a diversity and inclusion report. Our first one was in 2019, and we've done those yearly ever since. We also have recruited an outreach coordinator, and we run diversity and inclusion workshops on a quarterly basis for the whole company.
Okay, so let's take ethnic diversity as an example. What did you do there in terms of your approach to outreach?
What we identified in our D&I report was, because of structural and cultural barriers, people from Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups weren't even coming into the industry. It had a real impact on the senior mid-level staff that we could recruit from. And of course, we're a regional production house, so Bristol has a smaller pool to pull from. So we knew that we needed to go right back to sort of grassroots levels, and as well as upskilling staff we already had. We also wanted to make sure junior talent, but also mid and senior level talent, knew that once they joined the company, which was so important to us, they felt they really belonged and that we were doing everything we could to support them.
So it sounds like you knew there were lots of different activities that needed to be in place in order for you to reach a diverse group of candidates, and particularly people from underrepresented backgrounds. What types of things did you do?
So we knew that we had to be much wider reaching when it came to advertising, so that we reached a lot more people. We brought on a great line producer called Melissa Lipscomb, who worked way ahead of production starting. I think it was about 5 months, in order to widen that pool, and we targeted a lot more grassroots organisations. But we were really naive, thinking it was going to be simpler than it was, and it wasn't. It was tough. And also I think one of the other problems we encountered were there were plenty of grassroots organisations, but hardly any of them covered animation. So we're already making that pool even smaller.
So you had Melissa in place. How did she find it when she was looking for talent, particularly from underrepresented backgrounds?
It was really, really difficult, because it wasn't like we did one thing and suddenly there was a result. We had to sort of spread out loads of tendrils, and one lead led to another, and we were successful. But we knew we had to do other things as well. So at the same time, we also ran a week-long Toon Boom training course where we took 6 people who had no experience in animation, hadn't done any university, and we took them on and did a full weeks of training, and then 4 out of those 6 people then got jobs on a production.
And can you tell me about the other things you've done to help talent from underrepresented groups progress and upskill throughout your organisation?
So we created a series director shadowing role for a really wonderful, talented woman from a minority ethnic group. And that was funded by the broadcaster, Screen Skills, and our own diversity funding pot. We have also done internships, placements, apprenticeship schemes. I mean, we've done a whole medley of things to create a much more diverse team. And I'm really pleased to say that the apprenticeships that we did 3 years ago, they're all still with us, and they've been promoted, and it's going really well. We also go into schools and colleges and the local community and do workshops to show the kind of wonderful creative jobs there are, and specifically the animation jobs there are.
Okay, so it's so clear that the work you've been doing here is going to benefit the whole of the sector, and we all need to do more of it. So how can the broadcasters and commissioners specifically support you to get this work done better?
I think being realistic about green lights and giving production studios enough time to really do a thorough recruitment process, because it's really tricky, and it's, like I said, it's not linear. You have to follow all these different leads, and of course that also takes loads of money. So having some sort of pre-production funding pot would be really great. The shadowing role was fantastic, but of course that costs money, and so having training funding so that you can do long-term training, because I think that's so important. You can't do this in a week, you can't do this in a day. To upskill people and to create experienced staff, you need to give them thorough and long-term training.
And individually, it's really hard, isn't it, for each production to do this work alone? So how do you think, as a community, you can all help each other do this?
Animation is obviously really tricky, but I think it's a general TV thing that lots of production companies don't even know where to start. You don't even know where to look. So I think if there was some sort of centralised platform where people could access it and see the kind of wonderful talent that we have, and, you know, studios being generous with each other and sharing talent and being open to those discussions. And I think we also need to go right back to the beginning and really think about the fact that kids at school don't know these careers are even out there, and going and doing more workshops and more community work.
Thanks so much for your time, Catherine. So next we're going to hear from some of your talent who've come through these routes into the animation sector.
So my name's Charlotte and I work in layout on the series JoJo and Gran Gran. Before working in animation, I worked in catering and also did a lot of volunteering at art galleries and worked in theatre backdrops and stuff.
Hi, I'm John. I'm layout supervisor for JoJo and Gran Gran. In my previous role, I was working as a project coordinator in an engineering consultancy.
My name is Kima. I am a production coordinator and I just graduated before I joined in productions.
Before working in A Productions, I didn't realise the vast positions that were in animation. So it was really cool to look at the different sectors within animation.
So I had an interest and I'd look up certain creative roles on YouTube. But certain aspects like the layout I do now or production, like when I've had a clue.
I never really looked at animation roles. I was looking more at, like I said, like live action stuff, so I hadn't really considered looking towards animation at all.
So while I was working in catering, I tried to explore the ideas of working in different creative sectors, and I came across Creative Access. A Productions have linked up with Creative Access, and I looked at the job description and I thought that looked quite interesting, and they were willing to help me develop my skills while I'm there, so working while training. So I applied for the job and also layered out all the skills I have and linked it to the job description, and it worked out well.
To make the transition from engineering to animation, I applied for an animation course at A Productions, and they saw I had transferable skills by looking at my CV.
So I literally just graduated. I was looking about just for any sort of production, media jobs, and I found an apprenticeship on Creative Access. It was a production assistant, so I came through with that basically.
My impression of the animation industry before coming into it was I thought it was very competitive, quite corporate, but working within it, everyone's very approachable and friendly, and it's nice seeing everyone else doing their different work. And also if you need any tips, everyone's willing to help, like show you different ways of how to use the program.
I've always had an interest in animation, and so it's been something I've been dabbling with over the years. I was always sort of trying to get my foot in the door, but I didn't know exactly how to do that.
I always thought animation looked pretty exciting, and there's so many things you can do with animation because you don't maybe have so many limitations that you would for live action. And I always used to watch like animated TV shows and wonder how it was made, so it was quite nice getting to actually see the process of it as well. I would advise someone who's looking into starting to maybe just don't be afraid to ask questions. Honestly, it's so much simpler if you ask, so you're not sat there worrying, but you actually just ask the questions and get the answers, and also ask why that's the way it is, because sometimes having the context and knowing the reason why things are happening kind of helps you understand it a lot more, and that's something that I wish I did more of, not just getting the answers but actually knowing why it is the way it is, basically.
Try and recognise the skills that you already have, whether it's organisational skills or software that might be used, even Microsoft Office, that could be applied in the production department. So there's loads of roles that you could fit into.
I was an apprentice, so I was doing kind of college 1 day a week during term time, and then actually just becoming a full-time production assistant on another project was quite nice. And then stepping up to a production coordinator role kind of felt quite, it always felt quite easy in a way, because it was just like basically everything I'd already been doing, but plus a little bit more and a little bit more responsibility, which after being in the company for so long, you kind of get that confidence to make some more decisions and have a bit more responsibility.
So working in A Productions, it's nice to see that there's other positions that I can also go into. It's opened my eyes to other areas where I can work in, and also develop my skills so I can learn more about different programs or learn more about the program I'm using now, so I have further knowledge.
I'm joined by Jessica Shibley. She's Head of Diversity and Inclusion for BBC Children's and Education. Thanks so much for joining us, Jessica. So let's get straight to it. When it comes to the diversity and inclusion targets that the BBC has set for its suppliers, for its production teams, how are you working now with those teams, with those producers, to help them really kind of achieve and really excel in getting the diversity work happening?
I think first of all, I think it would be helpful to state what our BBC diversity and inclusion targets are, what we're looking to achieve with them, and why they exist, I guess. And I think across the industry, and certainly at the BBC, the commitment that we've got to diversity and inclusion has never been stronger. We've got an ambition to create like a diverse organisation which really reflects the society that we serve. But I think the real challenge to be addressed across the industry is ensuring that we've got diversity and that lived experience off screen to make sure that there's authenticity in the stories that we tell. So in April last year, at the BBC, we introduced 2 key measures to demonstrate our commitment to achieving diversity and inclusion. And it was really to turn our ambitions and intentions into action. And really the goal is to make sure that we're providing value for all our audiences. So firstly, and you know, you may be aware of this because it was a big headline grabber, but we announced the biggest creative diversity investment in the industry, which was a financial commitment of £100 million of our commissioning spend, which gives clear commissioning focus to ensure that we're looking for, that we're developing and choosing programmes that represent all audiences across the UK. And monitoring our progress against this ensures that we're holding ourselves to account to deliver change, and that we're really transparent with the sector as well about how we're doing that. And the idea of this investment was to accelerate the pace of change, to increase diversity and inclusion, both on screen, but also within production teams. And in children's education, that investment will be £12 million of our commissioning budget across 3 years. And a lot of thought went into what qualifies a title for this investment. And to qualify, at least 2 of the 3 following criteria need to be met. So it's diverse content, it's diverse production leadership, or diverse company leadership. And with these criteria, we discuss them at the point of commission, we review them at delivery, and measure them at the point of transmission. And the second target, the second measure that we introduced last year to support the need for representation off screen were new targets for producers. We asked companies to commit to at least 20% of their production team being from one of the following underrepresented groups. So that's disability, ethnicity, and socioeconomic diversity. And this includes the whole production team, so right from runners to executive producers, craft roles, post-production, they're all included in that 20%. And so we've been working with producers to build these plans into their pitch right from the start, to discuss how they plan to achieve it as part of the commissioning conversations, and to ask them to report progress during production. And so on a practical level, on the back of all these initiatives and targets, we've introduced a series of initiatives and actions and events even to support our suppliers. I think firstly, we've been very open and forthcoming in sharing our own diversity and inclusion strategy for children's education with our suppliers, very much like acknowledging that we're also on this journey. We're not perfect at this. We're also looking to diversify our workforce and bring in that diverse talent as well. So we've actually set our own internal workforce targets, which are actually higher than what we ask of our suppliers. And we've committed to working with suppliers to supporting progression and also retention of diverse talent. So last year, one of the examples was we held our first diversity and inclusion themed webinar, which was for all our suppliers, sharing best practice on inclusive, accessible recruitment. And in that session, we shared the new measures that we've put into place in our own recruitment, allowing time to recruit, as an example, placement of job adverts, language used in the job adverts, addressing the interview process, which has been a really big one for us to really look to mitigate the impact of unconscious biases within the panelists. And what we've done is really share some positive case studies from both our own recruitment, but also from our other suppliers as well, because we want to make it clear that as an industry that we're really working together on this. And so as part of that webinar, we had an indie also as part of the panel sharing their experience and sort of a really positive case study with lessons that we can all take away and learn from. And I guess what has been really good is in the year that we have implemented our recruitment measures as well, we ourselves have seen an increase in diversity in our workforce. So we can see that there is a cause and effect relationship between the initiatives that we've undertaken and the results that we're seeing.
So it seems like the message, this is all so encouraging. And for me, the messaging sounds clear, right from the start, before, you're off the ground, that beginning, discussion with the commissioner before an idea, before we got too far down the line, this is at the heart of the commissioning process, talking about the diversity of your team, talking about the inclusion, both on and off screen, both your storylines, your content, your portrayal, and the people who are going to make it. That's all fantastic and really needed. If I can just go back to some of the specific targets to do with ethnicity, for example, socioeconomic background, disability. For many producers who are maybe based in the nations and regions, particularly targets to do with ethnicity can be a real challenge, because there are less people from Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups in the TV production workforce outside of London, for example. So are there specific things that you do with indies depending on where they are in the UK?
And I should add, actually, it's a really good point actually to bring out, because when we've said, especially with the 20% diversity of our production teams, we've said that whilst we're looking at these three protected characteristics of ethnicity, disability and socioeconomic status, we have said that actually we're asking teams to meet at least two of those three, really acknowledging the fact that, yes, across different parts of the country, that diversity isn't there in the population, and so it wouldn't be representative, and obviously it'd be more challenging. Although having said that, we are also working with outreach partners as well. So there's quite a few different groups that we've worked with to look at almost creating like a database, which actually we're working to deliver later this year, a database of talent, which includes their location, includes their skill set and their protected characteristics, so that we can support suppliers with diversifying their teams as well.
Moving on to how people practically access funds, how can your suppliers access, for example, this 12 million and the diversity fund? What process do they go through?
Sure. So the 12 million is not a fund. It's actually our existing commissioning spend, but it's just sort of an allocation of our existing commissioning spend. But what we have done, and you just alluded to it, is the diversity fund. So the Children's Education Diversity Fund has existed for many years, but in the last year we significantly, I guess we kind of supersized it. We expanded the investment that we've made with it, but also the scope of the fund as well. So it's gone from a £40,000 fund to a £300,000 fund, and we've created a framework to monitor its impact. And this particular fund is to support development opportunities for underrepresented off-screen talent, and it can be accessed, and it has been accessed for a real range of roles. So we've been supporting people joining the industry at entry level, but also in their mid-career progression as well. And we've also sort of taken into account what the underrepresentation itself can mean different things in different roles, in different sectors as well. So a nice example is that we had an application for animation and for VFX, where data actually shows that gender is significantly underrepresented. So 20% of the animation industry is female. 19% of the VFX workforce is female. So in that instance, we were able to fund a talented female editor, a VFX artist from a low socioeconomic background, to have her first role within an animation company. And we've had lots of, because we've just finished our first year of the fund in this format, we've got some really, really nice examples that we've seen. So other examples of funded placements include a talented creative Black animator who gained training and experience as an animation series director. Another example is we had an enthusiastic neurodivergent team assistant and runner who was interested in digital media, and they shadowed the games development and interactive content team. And another one was a new East Asian writer who we supported in a placement and gained mentoring to take up a senior writer role on a new production. So actually, at the end of this first year, we've been able to support over 30 placements across titles such as Jojo and Gran Gran, Gym Stars, Operation Ouch, and Toddler Club.
For people who've maybe never accessed the Diverse Fund before, what is the nuts and bolts process? Do they, for example, go out and find talent that they want to nurture? At that point, do they come to you and say, this is the person that we want to fund, and this is the amount, and this is what we want them to do? How does that conversation work?
Sure. So majority of our applications in the past year have been what you've just described, Mel. So it's been people that have come across talent from underrepresented backgrounds. The most common example we've seen is maybe if the supplier has held interviews for a particular role, and there may be some candidates that didn't quite get the role this time, but actually they can see some potential in them. They can see that actually this is someone we want to grow, someone we want to nurture. And that's been a really sort of common way of accessing the diversity fund, to actually bring that person on as additional headcount through the fund. But what we're starting to see now, and I think we're now developing the infrastructure to support this, is that we've actually now able to look at examples where maybe the supplier hasn't identified an individual, but we now, through building those relationships with various outreach partners, now have maybe some knowledge of some individuals that would be interested in a particular role, that are from an underrepresented background. So we're now actually looking to build some infrastructure around maybe that kind of almost matchmaking process of, okay, the indie has a role and they want to potentially access the fund, and then maybe we can actually look to see if we can help with finding that talent.
Do you fund specific practical skills training? We mentioned animation, particular kind of courses.
Absolutely. And actually we've got lots of examples where, as part of the diversity funded placement, we've also funded, whether it's training, it's mentoring. So yeah, very specific. Sometimes, with the VFX one, there was technical training as well, and access to software as well. So that's all, absolutely covered by the fund, because we want to make sure that the placement then becomes an opportunity for that individual to really take that step up. Because what we don't want the fund to do is that it was like a very finite sort of opportunity that then doesn't have any lasting impact or effect.
So on a very practical level, if someone wants to start a discussion about talent, either finding talent or nurturing existing talent that they found who are from underrepresented groups, how do they do it? Do they speak to you? Do they speak to their commissioner? Where do they go first to find out more?
Yeah, so if they have been commissioned, the first point of call would be their commissioning editor, but I'm also very happy, I've got an open door, you can contact me via email, so I'm very happy to engage in those conversations, and yeah, that's something that's been happening already, and it's been very fruitful.
Fantastic. Jessica, thank you very much for your time today. It's much appreciated.
Thanks, Mel. Thank you.
I'm delighted to be joined by Estelle Hughes, commissioning editor at Sky Kids. So Estelle, great to have you here with us. The first thing I want to talk about is how you work with the production companies, the indies that you commission on a practical level. How do you help them achieve Sky's diversity and inclusion targets for both workforce and your storytelling?
Hi, thank you for inviting me onto the panel. I think the first thing that we do is that we make it very clear that diversity and inclusion is at the heart of everything we do commission. So it's pretty rare that we even get to a point where someone is pitching or showing a project to us where it isn't a diverse production, certainly on screen. And Sky has a diversity manifesto, and we make it very clear what is required on screen as well as behind the scenes.
Let's talk about if a production's been commissioned and you're working with production managers and line managers to crew up. How would you talk to them about what the diversity targets that are in place? How would you help them then work out the talent that they can bring in that meet those targets, but also meet the editorial and the creative needs of the production?
We have a diversity and inclusion manifesto that covers all of Sky commissioning areas. And that includes, for example, giving production companies subscriptions to major diverse talent databases, ones like Film London for the Equal Access Network, Mama Youth, Triforce Networks, Dandy. So that's one element. We're also very upfront about these targets at every stage of the production, not just part of the commission sign off and approval, but we sort of engage on this in the development as well as the sign off, and then make sure that there are various checkpoints throughout production to make sure that these targets and requirements are being met.
Yeah. I've got the manifesto here, actually. I was just looking at some of the targets. So, for example, scripted target of 10%, I don't know if this applies to children's, but 10% for drama and comedy commissions to have a disabled writer by 2023. Is that applying to the productions that you're working with at the moment?
Yeah, it is. It is. That's the only one that's a target, I believe. I think everything, because that's proving to be one of the ones that is more difficult to achieve. So there's quite a bit of work going on in that area outside of kids, I think, more so. But the other ones there are other parts that are absolutely a requirement rather than just a target.
Yeah. And do you, in your experience, I'm guessing you work with indies who are based around the UK. Do you see certain challenges in maybe some nations and regions and others, not others? Have you seen patterns in terms of being able to crew up diversely? I
think in animation in the UK, that's at studio level, that's quite a challenge. But then there are other, there's quite a lot of co-production elements in animation. So there's perhaps studios in other countries that if we're co-producing, then that helps get a better balance across diversity. But I think animation, I would say, is pretty difficult in the UK to at the moment. It needs increase in its diversity.
So let's talk about cash. So how does Sky, from a funding perspective, how does Sky work with production companies to help them access funding that's available to do this work?
Well, Within Sky Kids, we look at at every production on a case-by-case basis. So where the productions are being made, what talent is available. So to your point about regional variations as well, and how we can support producers for that particular production. And sometimes that might be a case of actually adding budget and schedule time so that people can step up perhaps into roles that they may not have as much experience on, and therefore there's going to be an impact then on executive time or schedule time, things like that. So within a production we do that. So we don't have a tariff that is fixed for kids. So we can treat each production as it comes up, and you know where it needs financial support to hit the requirements. But then across Sky, there's kind of, as I say, these longer term projects that will increase. So there's a £30 million fund that Sky have pledged across 3 years to very much tackle racial injustice, and that's included, for example, putting money into Lewis Hamilton's Mission 44 Foundation, which is about trying to look at issues that arise from opportunity gaps and underrepresented backgrounds, particularly socioeconomic as well. So there's that kind of funding is available for projects wider, as well as the sort of individual, line by line budget item reviews on specific productions.
From a very practical level, I'm a line producer. I come to you. I've got I've found some talent, who are from a minority group who I want to either train or help kind of make the next step up. What is the process with you? Do I speak to you direct as my commissioner? Do we work through it together? Do we work out if there's an uplift? How do we do that together?
We do work it. Yeah, it would be us, you and I going through it together. It would be looking at, well, how much does that add to the budget to make that possible? Whether that's shadowing, whether it's if you like, promoting people that may not have as much experience normally, but we could look at promoting them and therefore adding in some support throughout the production, which obviously costs time and money. On series 2, for example, it might be promoting someone again who was on series 1, got a particular amount of experience, and can then be promoted to series 2. So yeah, we would do that ourselves and with our production execs here, and when that requires more money into the budget, then that's a discussion that we're very open to have and have had on shows already.
So it sounds like the messaging is, don't wait until you're mid-production.
No, definitely.
Yeah.
We wouldn't, to be honest, I don't think it wouldn't get greenlit as a commission. Those discussions happen either with, kind of prior to green light, or if we've got a development deal, which is something we do quite a lot with across Sky Kids. So that would be part of the development, and the deliverables on a development deal would include, if your production is not going to be sufficiently diverse, where is the shortfall and how can we solve it in advance? And we build that into the budget, and that is part of what gets signed off and greenlit for the production.
So Estelle, as well as encouraging and helping your indies and suppliers become more diverse and inclusive, I think it's really important that broadcasters do the same. And what work is Sky and the Sky Kids doing to ensure that we have representation and in leadership and in the kind of the decision maker roles and the roles within your company?
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Absolutely, the focus has got to be inwards and on ourselves as well here. There's a diversity action group within Sky that is there to drive change at all levels, and people in that group are at all levels themselves. We've got a content academy scheme. We're in year 2 of that. We've got where we've got talented young people. I think it's 20 that get taken on every year from underrepresented backgrounds, and this becomes their first opportunity to work in the media. The first year's intake they do 2 6-month placements, And we've got one within Sky Kids. She was here for the first 6 months. She worked, shadowed us on commissioning, on pitches, as well as kind of, just generally getting experience of working in an office. But and then they've moved on to another division within the commissioning group, and so we've got our second one at the moment. But I mean, Sky houses the Mama Youth Programme. They're based here at Sky, so there's that kind of support and joining up. I think I mentioned before that we're a partner with the National Film and Television School, and those the young people that are on those courses get placements here as well. So there's a lot of people coming in that are from diverse backgrounds that get to work around different divisions, and as kids we are very much involved in that, and it's working really well. It's makes me feel old with a lot of young people around, but I think that's part of it. So yeah, it works really well.
Estelle, thank you so much for your time today. Much appreciated.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
I'm delighted to be joined by Louise Bucknell, General Manager and Vice President for Kids and Family at Paramount UK and Ireland. Welcome, Louise.
Hello, welcome. Thank you.
First, could you just explain to me, you cover several channels and lots of different things, don't you? So which kids programming do you look after?
So I'm the head of kids for Paramount in the UK and Ireland. So that means that I commission and run the Milkshake service, which is the preschool free-to-air service on Channel 5. And also I head up the Nickelodeon network in the UK. So that covers our three brands, Nickelodeon, Nicktoons and Nick Junior.
Lovely. Okay, so it would be great to talk about how you work specifically with your production companies and suppliers for both those streams, all those streams, on a practical level to help them achieve diversity and inclusion, both on and off screen. Let's maybe talk about off screen first, because that's where a lot of the challenges still are. So could you talk me through how in your role you work with them on their diversity work?
So at Paramount, we've got a no diversity, no commission policy, and that was introduced in July 2020 internationally for all productions. And what that means is that we ensure that we want to include in an authentic way, weave throughout all of our content, diversity in everything we do, both on and off screen. And it's not a box that we tick, and it's very important, this obviously, because we want to be reflective of the worlds that kids live in, and obviously portray kids on screen for the way that they live, but obviously off screen, that's very, very important. We did a report in 2021, which is a global report for Paramount called Reflecting Me, Global Representation, and 15,000 people were interviewed. And they were sort of interviewed about sort of diversity on and off screen, and 9 out of 10 people agreed that they did not see themselves accurately represented on screen. So when we talk about how we work with productions, it's really important that we have the diverse mix of a production team. So when we are commissioning a show, we discuss the editorial with the production companies, of course, from the outset, and that can be from the idea or the pitch or the script that we've had. And we want to ensure that we've got, a good range of writers, production staff, as well as the storylines, the characters, the cast, and the voiceover. And so this covers all diversity, whether it is ethnic diversity, gender, age, sexual orientation, religion, social mobility, disability, and also regionality. Regionality is very important for us as well. Over 60% of our commissions, for example, on Milkshake have been regional since 2019. And so what we do is we work with the production teams to look at their mix of talent that they have, and we would often suggest certain people in the case of writers, or we might look at sort of what the mix of the production team that are, whether they're the animators or the producers, etc., and try to ensure that there's a real balance. And we have diamond reporting at Paramount, and this is something that we do on all of our productions. So we report back those figures and obviously look at how we increase those areas each year for Paramount Productions.
I'm interested in, if you don't have specific targets, how you would work with a production, with a line manager, to identify the areas where they need to widen and deepen the talent that they are bringing in, and where, I guess, where their gaps are and where, you know, you want them to improve. How do you do that work with them?
So one area that we're really sort of working hard on at Paramount, and particularly some of our milkshake commissions, is disability. So in March we introduced we announced that we would be partnering with other broadcasters on the disability passports, and that allows people to create a confidential inclusion passport that can better support disabled people at work, so they're transferable between departments and also across different jobs when they leave to go to a different role. For us, we've commissioned a sort of groundbreaking series, Mix Mups, which is the first time that we've made a show for Milkshake that has disabled-led production team, and they want to represent stories in a slightly different way and tell them from a different perspective. So the core cast, the lead characters, there's a wheelchair user, a character with impaired vision, there's assistants, pets, and also we're looking at how we can enhance the episodes with a sort of range of access services. But for us, this is the first series that's made by a production team that has lived experience, and that is really integral to sort of how they're producing the show. And we're learning a lot from the production team as we go through the production as well, because we want to ensure that disability isn't just the narrative driver, it needs to be representative and inclusive from the lived experience, and ensuring that, you know, kids feel that these are characters first and it's representative of disability as well.
Do you know much about that talent journey? What has it been like to find talent who, you know, let's face it, you know, regardless of their protected characteristic, have to turn up and do a very, you know, creative and complicated job? How has that talent sourcing happened?
Yeah, it's been interesting because the company that pitched the show has been led by Rebecca Atkinson, who is she's the founder of the Toy Like Me campaign. So she has been very active within the sort of industry to encourage disabled writers and animators as well. And she runs something called the Popcorn Story School, where she brings writers together to sort of do their storylines in a slightly different way. So it comes very much from the production team as well, and they have brought that experience to us and have ensured that it's something that is layered into the production. And I think for us at Paramount, we've recruited apprentices, and also we've been working with the government with the Kickstart scheme to try and have a broader workforce as well, and giving opportunities to sort of underrepresented groups, but also those that might have had a barrier to enter the media for whatever reason. They might not have gone to university or done a sort of animation course. So we're giving those opportunities as well. We also have a really good ERG, employee resource group, at Paramount as well. And one of the groups that we don't have at the moment is a disability ERG. So that's going to be set up to sort of further that amongst Paramount as well, internally for our workforce as well.
So how does this work get funded by your indies? Because actually it costs thousands and thousands of pounds to do recruitment, to do modifications, you know, to workspaces, to help people be able to turn up and do their best work if they have a disability, you know. So where is that money coming from that the productions are spending to be able to ensure this talent can thrive in their organisations?
I think it's sort of like there's a number of different schemes that, as I said before, we work with Screen Skills and have all of our productions pay into a levy, so that's well supported to provide a sort of training and schemes for underrepresented groups. We don't have separate funds that the productions can come to us from, so you'll get a commission if the show obviously is right for us, but if there is no diversity that's core to the idea or within the production team, then we're not going to commission it. So obviously our license fees will help to ensure that there is that mix of representation across both on and off screen.
It's a really great figure you mentioned earlier. I think it was 60% of your productions were based in the nations and regions. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So for Milkshake, since 2019, 60% of all of our UK originations have been regional, which means they're outside of London, the M25. And that's been really important for us to ensure that we're getting a different tone of voice, different accents, and also talent from all over the UK and Ireland as well.
So Louise, we're doing a lot better, aren't we, on screen? So representation and authenticity on screen has been leading in children's programming. How do you think we can ensure we build on that, we just get better and we continue to lead in terms of representing all of our diverse and complex audiences?
Well, that's interesting because from the most recent Diamond reporting figures, kids comes up really high on screen. For example, disability on screen is represented highest in kids, it's 12%. This is content obviously from all over the UK. Women are better represented in kids' content at 57%. Race and ethnicity is the highest in children's content, and also LGBTQ characters as well. And I think for when we talk about Milkshake, we've got some really great factual shows that we have been making over the last couple of years. It's something that we've been very supported from the Young Audiences Content Fund. And one of those shows is Meet the Experts, where it's a hobby, it represents hobbies of kids, and it comes from the kids themselves. They talk about their hobby and they get a treat or a challenge. And we've been able to cast kids from all over the UK, from many, many different regions. We've had some amazing kids, including Harmony, who's a disabled gymnast, who won the Pride of Britain Awards last year, to a wheelchair racer, Owen, who has cerebral palsy, and met his Olympic heroes, Dave Weir and James Freeman, who raced him in the show. We also worked with the National Autistic Society on a show, Daisy and Ollie, with an autism special episode called How to Make Friends with Theo. And this also featured Paddy and Christine McGuinness, and they input into the show from their own lived experience of having autistic children. And I think with the more and more we do to sort of make it very authentic, to represent the audience, it just has such a richness of content that we have as a result.
It's a really important point, isn't it? And particularly there, you mentioned autism. We're just starting as a society, aren't we, to understand and talk about neurodiversity in a way that we never did before. So having all of this in your content and discussed and there for people to learn from is brilliant. Thank you very much for your time, Louise.
Thank you.